Boom, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. So the spring game or spring practices have come and gone. And I just wanted to give you guys my 2 cents regarding it, because that's what everybody in this space does. Observations from the practice and more in particular the spring game. But I got to just say this right off the bat. Quite frankly, guys, you really cannot make any sweeping takes or generalizations, or takeaways, whatever you want to call it, from just the one practice. You really can't, because number one, you don't know ultimately what is going on behind the scenes, what strategies the coaches were kind of going for, what they were trying to implement. You know, were they trying to give certain guys more reps just so they could take a more of a look? And it's not necessarily that they're a starter. They just wanted to give them a look. Number two, there's 14 other practices, guys, you know, and we don't get to see them all. So it's very difficult to make any sweeping generalizations. But just based off of the one practice and what we've heard from the coaches and the media availability, some of the insights and the open looks into the previous practices, here we go. By the way, like, comment, share, subscribe. I want to get to 2,000 subs by the time the season starts. So help your boy get there. Number one, Cade McNamara is the unquestioned starter. And I do find it, I don't want to say problematic, but I find it not a perfect situation that Spencer Petrus is hanging around as kind of he's taking up a scholarship, yet he's really acting as a coach right now. Guys, I have been following Iowa football since I was 10 years old, and I have been critically following it for the past 5 years. And I can tell you that one of the things the coaching staff does is they go with what they're familiar with. I mean, I think that everybody does that. But specifically with the Iowa coaching staff, they are not always willing to take leaps or risks. They go with what they're familiar with. And they're extremely familiar with Spencer Petrus. And so I don't know ultimately what his timetable is on his injury, but I'm just slightly concerned that when the season rolls around, he is going to be healthy, and it's potentially going to cause problems. Now, I could be totally wrong with that. That is not necessarily a full-blown observation from the practice. But in general, I am slightly concerned about that, because I truly believe, and I'm not saying this as a slight against Spencer Petrus, and ultimately I'd be fine if he decided to be a coach. In fact, I think it would be good to get a former player on the staff who's younger, who could help you in recruiting, things like that. But if he is going to play, I think potentially it could be problematic. Like I said, I don't necessarily want to use that word, and I could be wrong, but I'm not liking what is happening there. And in my eyes, Iowa needs to completely move on from the Spencer Petrus experiment at quarterback. Okay. He just, and I've said this for a long time, Iowa just does not work. Their system just does not work with an immobile quarterback. Unless that quarterback has an elite arm and is, Peyton Manning up here and is as quick as it gets in diagnosing plays and stuff like that, it doesn't work because the Iowa offense is so vanilla that you need a quarterback back there who can do things outside of the vanilla scheme that you offer. And you look back at the previous quarterbacks, and in my opinion, the most successful of the last 4 Iowa quarterbacks would be C.J. Beathard. And he had the ability to escape the pocket. Nate Stanley, not really. But Nate Stanley had better arm talent than Spencer Petrus. So he was able to make it work at times. So they need to completely move away from him. I said last year that I would have gone with Joey Labus and thrown him into the fire and just seen what you could get, because last year the defense was so good and the offense was so bad that putting Joey Labus in there, as long as he was just as bad as Spencer, it would have made no difference, with the exception of him being young and having much more potential. But Cade McNamara is the unquestioned starter at quarterback. It looks as though Deacon Hill, the former 4-star out of Santa Barbara, is QB number 2, which is very interesting. He must be doing really well in camp to have cemented or supplanted Joey Labus, because, Labus, we were hearing good things about him. He wins and has a decent game, not terrible, not great, but not terrible, against Kentucky, an SEC defense. So Deacon Hill must be doing some good things in camp, and we're hearing that he is too. So I think that's good news. I think Iowa has 3 legitimate offers at quarterback. Now, I also want to say this. I don't think it is totally out of the question that Joey Labus decides to depart even before the season starts because he sees the writing on the wall. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's certainly possible. Don't be surprised if that happens. Which would be a bummer to me, because I think Joey Labus is the most talented quarterback Iowa has been able to get out of high school in years. All right, observation number 2. I think the running back room is very healthy. Gavin Williams moved on. He was never really able to take the next step at Iowa, and he constantly battled injuries. But you have LaShawn Williams and his veteran abilities, his ability as a runner. Caleb Johnson is probably the most athletically gifted running back Iowa has had in years. Josiah Patterson looks to be, we're starting to see why he had offers from the SEC schools, Alabama, places like that, because he has legitimate talent, folks. And I like the incoming freshman out of Texas, Tyrell Washington Jr. I like his game a lot. And I believe that he will not redshirt just because of how in need Iowa is of playmakers, especially on the outside. So that is observation number 2. The running back room is really solid. And as long as the Iowa offensive line can be average, I think the run game will be better this year. Observation number 3, Iowa still has problems at wide receiver. Brody Brecht decides to depart, or, well, not depart, but focus primarily on baseball, which I told you guys was highly likely. He was just having much more success with baseball, especially early on. And, football is a sport that requires much more physical development, especially at a school like Iowa, And his upside in baseball is just higher. It's not that he didn't have the upside in football, because, 6'4" wide receiver that can run a 4.5, 4.6 always has upside. But the room is extremely thin, and I don't understand what is going on. Why 2 years in a row is the wide receiver room extremely thin due to injuries? That's a problem. Hopefully that gets addressed. But this is 2 years in a row, folks, where Iowa has had multiple injuries at the wide receiver position. When those guys are healthy, I think the room is adequate. And I think they have playmakers, and they have the athleticism, they have the speed. They got a veterans in Deontay Vines and Nico Raggiati, aka Nico Ragaini. So, it just sucks that we were not able to have a legitimate assessment on the wide receiver group because of how injured they are. Tight ends look good. That's going to be a position of strength for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Obviously, Iowa has 2 NFL caliber tight ends that we know of right now, in Eric All and Luke Lachey. But my final takeaway on the offense, I could talk about the offensive line, but my final and my main takeaway regarding the offense is it's the same old, same old. And we heard as much from Brian Ferentz when he had his media availability. And quite frankly, it almost seems as though Brian, because when you're in a situation like Brian Ferentz is in, you can go one of 2 directions. And even he has spoken on this. You can, number one, kind of move towards placating and having more of an open mind and, some legitimate self-introspection about what you can do better. Or you can dig even further into the ground on what you've been doing and why it's correct, and everybody else can just go shove it. And it seems he's going in that direction. I would say he's almost fully in the position of, and again, we've seen as much, which is what happens. If my time here at Iowa is done, so be it. He's moving in that direction, which is not good, guys. I don't think that's a good sign one bit. Now, if you're somebody who just absolutely wants Brian Ferentz gone, then it's good. But for me, listen, do I believe Brian Ferentz is the answer at OC? No. But at the same time, I want my Iowa Hawkeyes to win, and I don't want any season just to be a throwaway season. So my opinions are going to be based off of what we have to work with, which is right now Brian Ferentz. And his attitude is not good towards the offense, making the improvements that they need to have a good football season. He is moving closer and closer to whatever. And ultimately, maybe he legitimately believes he's not the issue at offensive coordinator. So, I don't really know what else to say about it. It's the same old. And ultimately, and I've been saying this for months, the only hope that we have as fans is that Cade McNamara is good in spite of the scheme and Brian Ferentz. And that Cade McNamara is so good that single-handedly he's able to lift Iowa's offense to statistical places that we haven't seen in a while. To me, that is the only hope. And maybe Caleb Johnson just being so damn good at running back that, it lifts Iowa slightly. Defensively, guys, Iowa is loaded. They always are. I know people are saying that they're thin at corner, but ultimately they just need 4 guys who can man the corner position. And they got it. They got Sebastian Castro, who's more of a cash guy. Cooper DeJean. Jamari Harris is going to be back. He has starting experience. TJ Hall. They have options. And ultimately, Iowa definitely has 2 guys on the back end that are NFL caliber players in Cooper DeJean and Xavier Wampa. I would even argue that you could say maybe even 3 or 4 with Sebastian Castro and Quinn Schultz. So they're going to be fine. And I would even go a step further and say that they could be one of the best defensive back units that Phil Parker has ever had, just because of how talented Cooper DeJean and Xavier Wampa are. Linebacker, we weren't, ultimately it's going to be Nick Jackson, Higgins, and whoever wins that 3rd spot. We saw some young guys. We'll continue to monitor their development. It looks as though the young guys that are making some noise are Carson Sherrar and what's his name? Jaden Harrell. There was one guy that I had my eye on and thought he had tremendous upside and potential at Iowa, but we just haven't really heard much about him, and that's Zach Tweed. Physically, he looks fantastic, but we just haven't really heard much about him. The defensive line, every defense is only as good as their defensive line, and Iowa is loaded. They probably have top 3 defensive line yet again in the Big Ten as a whole. So that's it, guys. That's my assessment from the spring. And, I think that the expectation for this Iowa team, even with Iowa's offense being what it is, should be minimum 9. This should be a 9-win team, if not possibly 10 or 11. This is a good team, guys. Good roster. And we'll see what Iowa can add here in the second transfer portal. But this team has talent. It has depth. Iowa is elite on defense and on special teams, which is very important for a team like Iowa. The running back room should be better than it was last year with some established names. And you look at it, and the team as a whole, yes, they lost pieces in Sam Laporta, Jack Campbell. Those are big names. I get that. But as a whole, the defense and the special teams are as good as it's been. The only difference is Iowa is better at quarterback, and they have a better running back room than they did last year. To me, and last year, they could have easily won 9 games. So they should win 9 games. That should be the expectation this year. All right, guys, like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and facts are feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks.